So, so what we've kind of seen in the different marriages that we've been involved with to help. Some we've been able to help, others we haven't, and there's been some really tragic experiences that we've seen as a result of not being able to see the marriage brought back. But one of the things we've noticed is that generally speaking, marriages will stay intact until another person arrives in one of the partner's lives. So it's a very interesting thing. But typically people will stick around until somebody comes along and starts to win their heart. Now, there are many things about that we would be able to talk about if we had like reams of time. But I think the basic thing that we want to say is that, generally speaking, the reason another person can come and begin to steal away another person's heart is because something in the relationship, and I'm not saying that their partner is always to blame, but something in the relationship is not meeting something that they desire in their lives. And I want to say to you, like, here's what we've seen. In this new relationship, this new one that they're coming to, what happens is that person responds emotionally to the partner that has the need. And in that moment of reaching out emotionally, there gets to be this thing of comparison. And negative comparisons about our spouses are deadly. They're like one of the worst things we can do. So looking at your spouse and then having you've got negative thoughts about them already. So you're saying, they don't respond to me very kindly anymore. Well, they don't care about what I'm doing. They just leave me alone. They're off doing their thing. They've attached to the kids and I'm no longer important. Or in my case, he's attached to the ministry and I'm no longer important. All kinds of reasons, but when we start to make those negative comparisons, then we're really starting to open ourselves up to an affair. And people will say, well, it's not sexual, they're nice. Like, I feel like they make me feel good about myself again. It's not sexual, it's just they're really nice. But isn't it interesting that in almost every case we've ever seen that really nice person came along and they began to praise you and they began to care about you and they began to lift your spirits and encourage you, and you start feeling that, inevitably you always end up in bed with them. It's just, that's the way it is, because there is something about when we're opened up inside of ourselves, in that place of intimacy, in that place of being loved, in that place of being cared for, that we actually then want to open up in sex. Someone can hate sex with their partner and yet have this wonderful experience of emotional bonding with this other person outside of their marriage, and pretty soon they're enjoying sex with this new partner until they get married. That's true. Until they get married. And then what happens is the same old thing happens. So I believe that's at the foundation of what we call porneia, or pornography, or porn. You see, pornography isn't just looking at hot bodies and getting your thrills off of that. Pornography is quite something very, very different that we don't think about. Pornography is actually objectifying a human being and turning them into an object. And That's what's wrong with pornography. It's turning people into objects. And when you look at the history of pornography, as far as sexual pornography or other kinds of pornography, what is intention to do is to say, you can have all of this without knowing that person at all, without having any responsibility to that person at all, without having any commitment to that person at all. You can have all of these wonderful, wonderful things that are so good. And when you have an image of something in your mind, and that image becomes predominant, you bond to that image. Because whoever you have sex with or whatever you have sex with, you bond to that. That's what it's meant to do. It is the glue that binds people in relationships. So when you have sex in front of the computer with an image, you get to where the other relationships of your life are not able to satisfy that, because you're in a place where you don't have any responsibility at all. It doesn't take anything for you to give anything to that picture, because you're just getting everything and nothing is going out. And that bonding to that objective perspective wrecks the possibility of intimacy. And that's why, as men, but also there's women too who are involved in it, we need to stop and think about, what are we really doing? What are we doing with our power as men? What are we doing with our sexual power as men? We're committing itself to an object. And that's idolatry. What Harvey said today, it's idolatry. Like real, beautiful, intimate relationships in sex require you to have an intimate relationship with that other person, where you know them, you love them, you care about them. What their desires are your desires. Where you have, and they cannot be just an object of your lust. It can't be. And you know, like we can talk about that. That's true not just around sex. That's true about all kinds of things. That's true about money. That's true about power. It's true about anything in the world where you can turn a person into something that we use. Slavery was simply turning a human being into an object of work. And so in that objectification of them, it didn't matter how you treated them. They were just objects. And whenever you turn someone into an object, it doesn't matter anymore how you treat them. You can treat them in any way you want to, and they're just an object. They're just a thing. And people can do that with each other. They can. But the desire for God is for us to never see one another as objects. Never see one another as things. Never see one another in the scope of our own ego. But to always see the other person, and this is not just true of sexual relationships, it's true of every relationship on the planet, that we are to always see another person as created in the image of God and worthy of the love of God and the respect of God. That's it. And that simple truth needs to be brought into our marriages. So I'm not going to go a whole lunch further in that. I think you get the idea. And we're not going to have that discussion because we are really moving here. So here's something that I learned, and it was a really good lesson, but it was kind of hard for me to learn. When we were first married, we remained not having sex together. I am deeply, deeply saddened by the fact that I couldn't come into our marriage as a virgin. I think it's a terrible, terrible thing that I did to Carie. I wish, like anything, I could go back through the years and undo all of that mess that I had created. And when I came into it, sadly, into our marriage, I had a lot of baggage. And a lot of it was baggage of things that I had done with other women. And like I started my sexual exploits when I was 12 years old with a girl who just absolutely taught me just everything there was. Her mother was a prostitute, and I was a total willing partner, but it left me with images, which is the reason that we need to stay away from pornography. It puts images in your mind that are hard to erase. They're hard to get rid of. And so when I came in, we had a question about that this morning, and I wanted to kind of answer it now. When I came into the marriage, I was a Christian and I wanted to be pure, but I just kind of thought this is the way things work in sex. Like I just had this idea that, well, this is what it's all about. Well, we didn't really have a major problem in our married life around sex for a long time, and yet, there was a day that we came to where Carie kind of said, I think I really feel something about what we've been doing all of these years. I'm getting to where I start to feel like that I'm just doing this because you have a need and you have a desire. And, well, that broke my heart. That broke my heart. But let me tell you that almost all of Christian literature around sex gives the idea, they come right out and say it in some books. He's got a need that you don't, and it's your requirement to fulfill it. I want to tell you that is just such a lie. It is such a lie. It is such a lie. Because God didn't create one of us without any desire for sex. He didn't. He created both of us. But here's what happens a lot of times in marriage is that, especially Christian marriages, this is where it goes really bad, is that we tell people, well, this is his need, so just do it. And what happens then is we begin to create within the marriage a sense of disconnection. Why? Because, really, when you think about it, who wants to make love with somebody that doesn't want to make love with you? Really? Like, who does? Really, it's just, at the core of your being is you want your partner to give you sex just because you need it and she doesn't want it, or you need it and he doesn't want it, and just go ahead and do it anyway because, well, God says you're supposed to? That's like nuts. And yet it's those very, very kinds of ideas that get into our thinking when we go on this basis of, well, I have a need and you're not meeting it. I have a need and you're not meeting my need. And it can just turn so ugly. It can turn so ugly. And it ought to be our desire that both of us would desire each other fully. Well, for me, that was kind of like, well, you can't have sex, make love, whatever you want to call it, do romance, whatever word you want to say euphemistically. Sorry, I'm not meaning to be gross or anything else like that, but this is just a problem that I see in almost every guy that I know, and I'm trying to help us to work it out. If you have sex every day with your wife, she's probably not going to like it. It's true. The Bible calls you a running stream, and she calls her a cistern. Well, a cistern has to be filled up. You have to fill up the cistern. The stream's all ready to go anytime, and just, well, anyway, let's not go there. But I started realizing that, and Carie said, I really want, it's been great, it's awesome, but I'm just feeling like I really would like to kind of have a little space, like just a little space. I really think that one of the love languages that got left out is space, because all the other love languages are requiring you to be this, wow, we are together, and that would be me, like. I see that hand. Like, if I can touch her, if I can be near to her, if I can be talking to her, if I can be listening to her voice, and if I can be cuddling with her, And I mean, I'm not just talking about sex, but just, I'm all over this woman. Like, it's like, and she's saying, just, yeah, let me breathe. Right, you got it. But, so I said, well, I want it to be amazing for you. So how can I do that? And she said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you let me be the one who says when we do? I was so upset. Like, really? Like, really? Like, what is that? I rebuke that. And there came this little bit of tension between us, if you know what I mean. Like, it wasn't very fun for the next little while. And, it was like not just exactly, oh, sweetheart. It was like we were kind of having some issues because she likes space and I like closeness. And wow, when we get to where we start hitting on that, we're in real trouble. One night I was begging the Lord, please show me, because I really do want to be the best husband I possibly can be. And I believe every man in this, you wouldn't be here if that's not what your heart was. If you were just wanting to find something else to do, or, you wouldn't be here. I really wanted to be the best lover I could possibly be for this woman. And the Lord gave me a little picture. And this is what the picture was. You can say it was God or I've got a great imagination, but it was really, really life-changing for me. He said, now, Leonard, let's say you were really, really, really ugly. I mean, really ugly. Like, let's say you had a major deformity and you were really, really ugly. And, I mean, I'm not great, but I'm not shot either, you know what I mean? Like, I'm okay. And I was a lot better in my prime, but just what if you were really, really ugly? Peter, I mean, just really ugly. And no woman would ever look at you in any way of wanting you to be her husband, right? And so you had zero chance of ever having an intimate relationship with a woman. Zero. I mean, you were at the basement, the bargain basement, three levels down. Like, really ugly. And let's say this really kind woman began to care about you. And she looked beyond your ugliness, and she looked beyond your deformities, and she looked beyond all that, and she just loved you. She cared about you. She had a heart for you. She was completely out of your class by 1,000 miles, which that was my story too, but I wasn't quite as shot as being ugly that you couldn't stand me. Uh-oh.
He is first class.
So anyway, he said, now what if she married you? What if she loved you so much and she said, I want you to be my husband? And you didn't have sex before you were married, and you got to your wedding night and you enjoyed a beautiful, wonderful experience of sexual love with one another. And then the next day you were in a terrible car crash, and I'd have known this has happened, and she was killed, and you were alone for the rest of your life. How would you think about that night? What would you think about that one 20-minute period, 30-minute period of relationship that you had? What would you think of that? And I said, I would be so absolutely grateful for the rest of my life that I had that gift that she gave me. Well, God always leads you into this place where he's got you, checkmate. He said, well, why don't you let her decide if she wants to give herself to you, and be grateful for every single time she does. What could I say? Sorry, we're not going to. What could I say? And I put that into practice. And it really altered so many things about our relationship. Because a marriage should never be based on having sex with each other because the other person needs it. It should never be that. It should only be based on a marriage that says, I want you and you want me and we want this together. And sometimes we have to give people space and permission to start to feel that again. Because a lot of times what we do is we settle. And when we settle, we just kind of say, well, let's get this over with. Go ahead if you have to. Like, really? Like, go ahead, I guess so. And really, who wants to do that? Like, really? Like, who wants to do that? Really? I mean, honestly. But anyway, that's my talk.
Good job, dear.
The good news.
We're on to some good news now. So I would like to just start by reading some of the passages concerning our sexual relationship in marriage. So I thought we'd just listen to what God says. 1 Corinthians 6:13-20. The body, however, is not meant for sexual immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. By his power, God raised the Lord from the dead, and he will raise us also. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ himself? Shall I then take the members of Christ and unite them with a prostitute? Never. Do you not know that he who unites himself with a prostitute is one with her in body? For it is said, the two will become one flesh. But whoever is united with the Lord is one with him in spirit. Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. Galatians 5 says, for you were called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but serve one another through love. Let's read what Solomon thought in Proverbs 5 and 6. He thought in the beginning of his life, the more wives, the merrier. But later in his life, this was his wise advice. Drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your springs overflow in the streets, your streams of water in the public squares, let them be yours alone, never to be shared with strangers. May your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. A loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be captivated by her love. Why be captivated, my son, by an adulteress? Why embrace the bosom of another man's wife? For a man's ways are in full view of the Lord, and he examines all his paths. If you at this moment are thinking, I haven't used my body as an instrument of righteousness, I'd like to share with you that God can and forgive and he can and will forgive and fully restore this part of our lives and actually pour his redeeming and healing love in and use this part of our past to bring hope and blessing not only to ourselves but to many others. We must never allow our past to determine our future. I just want you to say that with me. I must not allow my past to determine my future. I want to say it one more time. Make it personal. I must not allow my past to determine my future. And that's because we serve an awesome, awesome God. We do. And so now, our awesome God who created us and who we can totally trust in his heart has a plan which he created in the very beginning of time, and it speaks to us in the Bible. Adam and Eve were created for each other so they would never be alone. Think about that. They would never be alone, and that's what Leonard and I are trying to share with you. Intimacy is never being alone. Each had a role to play in the other's life to help and encourage the other to be absolutely the best they could be. God's motto was always and still is, better together. Better together. It was not bite and devour. That was the serpent's motto. They were naked in every way, spiritually, emotionally,